YouTube Ozzy in the Goat House is back. The NFL trade deadline is approaching, and there are so many players linked to deadline rumors right now. It's ridiculous. We're going to talk about 39 candidates in this video, break it down. Really excited about that. Realistic candidates, by the way. We're going to have several trade deadline videos. We'll do scenarios. We'll do predictions. We'll have landing spots for guys. So I'm really excited about all that. Hopefully you guys, it's like what we always do here at the Goat House, those types of videos here. So join us, like, subscribe, turn notifications on. We have weekly videos as well, including weekly picks and a lot more. So join us. Much appreciated. Any link you're looking for, Twitter, Picks League, sponsors, Liquid IV, GLD Shop. You see I'm rocking the GLD Rams chain right now. NFL teams, NFL players, Real Gold. We got the code GOAT on those sponsor sites. So any of those things you're looking for, links pinned in the comments there. And then here's our Twitter, link down below. A lot of, our news video got taken down off YouTube, apparently too inappropriate for this week. I think it was the Robbie Anderson segment. I'm going to go ahead and take a guess. It's on Twitter right now. Live, news, rumors, updates, a trade deadline. We got you guys covered. Elijah Moore news just broke a little bit ago. Make sure you follow that Twitter. Very important, especially for this time of the year. Link pinned in the comments. But so to all the trade deadline candidates, there's 39 in this video. We're going to start with the best candidates here. It's a mixture of guys that have been kind of linked in rumors, realistic, legit sources, and a mixture of guys that I think are legit candidates. Maybe they haven't been mentioned yet, but I think are, legit candidates here. So let's start at the bottom of this list, actually. Elijah Moore, because this news, I had to add him, a late addition to this graphic, because the news just broke right before going to record this, and that he requested a trade. Elijah Moore, that is, and he was not at practice. He's not happy right now, wants more action on the field. But, yeah, it's a little tricky. I had to throw him in here because it's recent news. People probably want to hear, me talk about it. I don't expect him to be dealt, though. You never know. Maybe he continues to hold out, but I kind of tweeted that too. I mean, the Jets were very stubborn still are stubborn with trading Denzel Mims, so they're definitely going to be stubborn when trading Elijah Moore. So that's tricky, but a very good player, very good young slot receiver that would be a great addition for any NFL team. So I got to monitor, I suppose. Christian McCaffrey. Probably the most talked about guy maybe right now out of the best candidates here, the Panthers running back. And at first it was like, will he actually get traded? Are the Panthers asking too much? To today, it's like, it sounds like it's heating up. It sounds like teams, sources that believe like this may happen. It actually may happen here. Teams are definitely interested. Maybe the Panthers, they had to have kind of came down on their asking price a little bit, because 2 firsts or more than a first plus would be ridiculous. Wouldn't do it. I wouldn't really do a first either. Very talented player, but the injury concern and the future years on the contract, which are realistic for his talent, but it's just, you're kind of tied up a little bit, So I think a second round plus, if it's a second, third, or, sure. So you talk about, I actually made a recent Panthers trade candidates video, guys that won't be traded, could be traded, landing spots, value, worth looking into if you haven't seen it. It's on the channel. And again, more deadline videos to come. But McCaffrey, I had landing spots like the Rams make a ton of sense. The Bills make a ton of sense. And then teams that make sense, Eagles, maybe Chiefs, maybe Niners, teams like that. So this McCaffrey by himself kind of makes a trade deadline awesome right now. And there's so many other guys that could be dealt. It's crazy. I mean, look at the offseason this year. It was crazier than ever. So it makes sense that this could be the craziest deadline as well. Who knows? Chase Claypool is a big time one, in my opinion. This news came out a few days ago that teams believe that they may be able to trade for the Steelers wide receiver Chase Claypool, and he may be available. I know him and Pickens, similar style receivers, so but they definitely like Claypool still. They're not going to give him away. Could they ask for a first? Maybe not. They may start with that. Could it be a second round plus? I think so. But very talented. His rookie year, he was fantastic. Since then, quarterback play has kind of slowly went down, actually kind of rapidly since then. And that's definitely affected maybe his production. But I think, his talent didn't disappear. If you go get him a good quarterback, he's going to be a stud. Very good contested catcher. Gets separation more than people give him credit for. So a lot of teams would be interested, right? But I could see, him with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that excites me. I'm a Vikings fan, and that excites me. Him on the Packers. The Packers got to be interested. It just seems like an Aaron Rodgers type of guy. Maybe a better version of Allen Lazard with a lot of upside here. So that's definitely a guy to watch for. Roquan Smith, the Bears linebacker, who was brought up during the offseason, going into the season, he could be a legit trade candidate, is what we were all saying then. Now it could come up again because the Bears are sellers right now. People try to say they're buyers. People kind of have them linked to certain. I think maybe it's just fans. They're not going to be. They're not going to be buyers. They're going to be sellers, if anything. And Roquan Smith could be one guy that's dealt because he's got an expiring deal. I don't really get the feeling that the Bears are going to go all in and give him a big contract. You don't really get the feeling that he fits the 4-3 as much as he did the 3-4. He's not playing as well. He still has his moments, but not as well as he did in the past. So get something for him. If you let him walk in free agency, you'll get a future third round, we'll say, compensatory pick. Could be fourth. I'm going to predict third. But you can get something a little more from him if you trade him right now, I believe. David Montgomery is a guy that hasn't really been brought up or like in a specific rumor. I can just see it because the Bears are in rebuild. They're sellers right now. I said it going into the season that Montgomery's a better back than Herbert. Khalil Herbert, that is, but Herbert fits this new scheme a little bit more, and we've kind of seen that a little bit here. Montgomery expiring deal. Bears, are they really going to extend it back here, especially when they have another one they really like and guy that they feel fits much better? So it makes sense to move on from Montgomery. I can. There's some teams that need some running backs right now. I mean, I can see him with multiple teams. The Ravens, I think, would love to have Montgomery. Rams, Niners, teams like that. So I see some teams there for Montgomery. And then Antonio Gibson, which hasn't really been brought up a bunch, but you look at that game against the Bears actually last week, they just insisted on Robinson. They just were refusing to put Gibson in. They put Gibson in. He looks pretty good. They take him back out. So it's like, he can't be happy. They're not in love with him. They're not winning a whole bunch of games right now, so could they move on from him? I think several teams could be interested, maybe some of the similar teams I mentioned for Montgomery there. The Broncos also could be looking for a running back, so we'll see. We know Cam Akers is probably going to be dealt, and he hasn't been super impressive recently, and he's had that injury, but we know the talent is definitely in there. Keep in mind the Rams are pass first. I don't get the feeling from them they do a really good job game planning with the run game. It's like it's all focused on the pass game. So if he goes to a team where he's going to get more of an opportunity, a team that's going to run the ball a bit more, I think they're going to get that talent out of him there. So Akers, cheap option that could be available. I mean, I bring up the Broncos that could use a better running back. Several teams could be interested in Akers. We've talked about it on Twitter a bit as well. Shaq Thompson, very solid linebacker from the Panthers. We know the Panthers definitely could be sellers, and there's rumors that came out that he could be dealt for perhaps, and he's a very solid linebacker that can blitz. Several teams could be interested. I look at the Commanders. I look at maybe the Lions. I mean, there's several teams that could be interested. Top of my head, the Cowboys, intriguing fit there. Do they feel like they need another defensive player? Possibly the Giants. There's several teams that could be interested in Thompson, a very good inside linebacker that could really can move around, in different spots as well. But he should get some interest there for sure. And then Mike Gesicki, tight end of the Dolphins, we kind of mentioned him after he was tagged that he could be dealt because it didn't look like the Dolphins had any interest in extending him long term. So now that he's a little cheaper as the season went on, in terms of the salary, he could be dealt for something. Teams looking for tight ends, maybe the Cowboys. Do they have, some of these teams still have enough cap though to afford him? That's the question with some of these teams, but the Cowboys wouldn't need him if Schultz is ready to go, so we'll see if he comes back. So, but it's been a little disappointing because he's been out. But Daron Payne's another one. He was more so mentioned going into the season, not so much right now, but maybe another name to kind of keep an eye out for because of that expiring deal. Very, very solid nose tackle and still young, so multiple teams that could use him. And we talked about Elijah Moore at the beginning here, so these are some of the best candidates, in my opinion. Other very solid candidates. We know William Jackson, it sounds like he's going to be dealt. Not happy with how the Commanders run their defense. A lot of zone coverage. They run some man, though. I know he's looking for a man scheme, but they do run a little bit of man there. But so he's going to go to a team most likely that runs a lot more man. I mean, Dolphins, Broncos don't run that much man, but they're looking for a corner. Steelers, teams like that, Raiders perhaps, and the Patriots known for their man, but they're doing pretty good with their corners. Problem with William Jackson, he's a little pricey next year. Cap hits me around 12 million, which it's still kind of a mystery what Jackson will be. Like even when he signed that big contract from the Bengals, it was kind of banking off upside, and he didn't really play to that upside yet. So it is a little tricky. He's a very good player, very good upside. I shouldn't say very good, but very good upside here. But it will fit the man scheme a little bit better, but a little risky. Jonathan Abram hasn't really worked out so far. He was a big name, big time prospect, but still a solid player. You can move around a bit. You can roam around the box. So the Raiders safety could be dealt. They've been playing him less and less, kind of going Mareg and Harmon, of course. So you'll see. There's not too many teams that need a safety, though. So is a team going to be dying to throw a decent pick at the Raiders for Abram? I don't know if I'm seeing that for sure. The Browns could deal one of their running backs. They haven't really been mentioned at all. Hunt was before the season started, and the Browns were like, hey, we're just gonna hang on to you for now. But teams probably calling about Dearness Johnson, Kareem Hunt, like, hey, is any of them available? Because we would like them. Hunt's going to be more expensive, obviously, in terms of the compensation, what you have to trade to get him, and a future contract, which sounds like it could be pricey. So I look out for those guys. Not both, but one could be dealt. A couple Patriots receivers, Nelson Aguilar, another guy that could be dealt here, as well as Kendrick Bourne. Teams have called about those guys. I'm kind of looking at the Raiders for either one. They're not going to trade both, I don't think. I think there's probably a decent shot they trade one of those guys. And I'd look out for the Raiders. And there's other teams that need receivers, but the Raiders could be interested in getting one of those guys for sure. I mean, they've had, Renfro injured, obviously, and could use another body in there for sure. And they're both familiar with Josh McDaniels' offensive system there, so that is a bonus as well. So Darius Slayton, teams are calling on Darius Slayton, but the Giants are pretty beat up at receiver. I think they like Slayton. They've been stubborn to trade him in the past, so I wouldn't count on him being dealt, but we know it's been confirmed that multiple teams have called and showed interest in Darius Slayton. So we'll see. Kadarius Toney's name has been thrown out there. He was thrown out there in the offseason as well. I mean, it's a young, high upside player, but that just can't stay healthy. So we'll see. Giants kind of need to hang on to the receivers. They do have Wan'Dale Robinson back. Him and Toney are kind of similar style gadget guys. So we'll see what happens there. His name's just been thrown out there from a legit source. Then Jerry Hughes, the edge rusher from the Texans, who's got experience getting after the quarterback. Not at a super high level, but there's teams that have been a little underwhelming staying consistent when getting after the quarterback, which is extremely one of the most important things in football. So if the Texans are sellers, which I would expect them to be, they may be interested in Jerry Hughes. So that's a pass rusher to keep an eye on for. So some solid candidates there. And then next we got some intriguing options. Bryce Hall, another Jets corner here, young, solid. Could go to a team that plays a little bit more man coverage, but then some people worry about does he have the long speed to play more man coverage? But he's a young option with upside, and their corners are playing so well right now that people may take a look at the backups and like, hey, this guy's young, he's got upside, he's learning from that, and we might have something here. We probably can trade something, a later pick possibly. So, and Sidney Jones looks like he's available. The Seahawks are kind of just playing the younger guys as expected, and Jones has got some good experience. And there's teams there's always a shortage on corners at this time of the year because there's always a lot of them injured. So there's quite a few teams, that can use these corners, Hall, Jones, that we just talked about. And we talked about the teams that could use corners. We talked about, the Dolphins are a little beat up there. The Steelers, the Broncos. I think the Raiders could use one. Giants could use one as well. Several teams that could use it. Jets receiver Denzel Mims, always linked to kind of the trade talks there. It really felt like he might be dealt before the season started. Didn't happen. Could he be dealt now? It's a possibility. Jordan Fuller, no one else really brought up his name. I'm going to bring it up, though, because the Rams just aren't using him a whole lot. He came back from injury, and they thought he would be mixed right back in there because he was very good with them before that injury last year, and he just really hasn't been used that much, and there's teams... I'd like to fit with the Bills. The Bills are doing just fine without Micah Hyde, but I would like that fit. It's very tough to replace Hyde, but I would like that fit, similar style player, kind of a poor man's there. So, maybe, he's playing less. Terrell Basham, he's been linked to some rumors that he could be dealt. The Cowboys got plenty of options at the edge position, and they're showing out pretty well, so teams could be interested in adding this key depth piece to their edge rotation here in Basham. Albert O of the Broncos, he was kind of hyped up going into the season, their tight end, and he just hasn't really been used, and the last coaching staff used him. This coaching staff perhaps just doesn't like him, so there are a couple teams that could use a tight end. I know the Vikings are showing interest in tight ends, cheaper option tight ends, so there you go. That could be one right there for them. Dwayne Smoot, pretty good defensive end. My issue is he's to me strictly a 4-3 defensive end, which the Jags are kind of giving more 3-4 looks, so that's why Smoot's not really being used a whole bunch. So a team that runs a 4-3, looking for another defensive end, could add a guy like Smoot for a cheap cost. I think about the Browns. The Seahawks kind of mix it up with their scheme a little bit, but a team like that as well. Browns make a lot of sense to me. And the same thing for Clelin Ferrell. It's another edge rusher, probably fits that 4-3 better. He's been pretty damn underwhelming, but he's behind some studs right now at the Raiders. I think we talked about him at the deadline at this time last year as well. So him and Smoot, I think teams rather have Smoot for sure. But yeah, 4-3 ends, in my opinion, that are a little intriguing because, a guy like Smoot's underrated, good player. Ferrell has that upside. So for different reasons there from the same position. More candidates talking about Mason Rudolph. It's felt like he was going to get traded before the season started, but then the Steelers were like, hey, we're not going to give him away. It really felt, I thought he was going to go to a team like the Lions, who were looking to upgrade their second-string quarterback. Goff has been better than expected. Maybe the Lions still feel like they want to back up. I don't know if it'd be worth it for them. I think the Rams could be a sneaky wild card team for a guy like Mason Rudolph. They don't have the strongest backup options, and Stafford is pretty dinged up, so maybe they want to get a little more comfortable there. So perhaps a team like that. Bradley Bozeman, who's been a solid center when healthy, that's kind of the key, but the Panthers really haven't been using him, probably because he started the year injured. Using Elflein for the most part instead, and then there's teams that could use it. Definitely could use a center. I look at the Cardinals. Rodney Hudson's constantly injured, and the Cardinals play tonight as well, and they kind of have snap problems when he's out. So maybe you just get a cheap option here that it'd be perfect too, because maybe Bozeman wouldn't be happy because he'd be just kind of being a second on the depth chart again, but if Hudson's out, then you use him. So there kind of limits him. It limits the chances of him getting injured. So it kind of makes sense for the Cardinals. But, I know the Chargers all of a sudden are beat up at center as well, beat up at left tackle. So they could be on some of these offensive linemen here. Cam Irving, tackle of the Panthers, another Panthers guy, has long-time experience, mainly just a really good number 2, like just in case option. But, there's teams that are desperate for starters right now. The Rams just had Noteboom go down. Do the Colts figure out what they have going at left tackle? There's quite a few teams. Same thing goes for Riley Reef, a better option than Irving, more starting experience. Surprised it felt like the Bears just signed him just so they can trade him at this point. Kind of proof that the Bears want to be sellers. I felt like they signed him and we're going to start the young guys because we want to develop them. So why the hell did they sign Reef? It's because they signed the interesting contract, the way they signed this, the way they structure it too, and now teams got injured at the offensive line position. Hey, we're going to get something for this guy. So there you have it. It might have been a really smart move by the Bears. Because there's teams that could definitely use a guy like Riley Reef. I keep mentioning, Rams lost Noteboom. There's several teams that could use a tackle. Austin Hooper, the tight end of the Titans. I thought he was going to fit the Titans very well. It just felt like a Titans type of tight end, kind of like maybe how they used him in Atlanta, and that just really hasn't worked out. Using a couple other guys more, surprisingly. So Hooper, I've heard there's been calls on him. It's got to be like a slate swap pick probably, but that could be a solid addition because he was very solid just a few years ago. So you'd like to think, maybe he can give you something if you're looking for a tight end. Marquez Callaway's name has been brought up, which is a little surprising to me because the Saints are very injured at the receiver position, so it feels like they need Callaway in there, but he's been brought up. I think it would only be if the Saints, because I've heard the Saints also being brought up for looking at other receivers, nothing super expensive receivers, but in terms of salary. But so I think this would only be if they added another receiver and then maybe they trade away Callaway. I was a little surprised to see his name brought up, but it's a legit source has brought it up there. Keyshawn Vaughn, the Bucs could be. I forgot to mention the Bucs with those other running backs too. They could surprisingly, you think they got Fournette, right? They have Rashad White, right? But they could add another back, like another better back in there, and they kind of could move on from the guys that are a little lower on the depth chart, like a Keyshawn Vaughn here. So the problem with this one, I don't think they'll have any takers. maybe conditional pick, like if he plays this many snaps, you get a 7th round pick. That's the only thing I can really see. Camus Grugier-Hill of the Texans, I've heard his name pop up again. The Texans could be sellers of some of these defenders here. They're coming off a win though, so I think the Texans maybe wait and see how they do against the Raiders and then decide if we're going to be sellers. But they could be selling some of these guys on a 1 or 2 year deal here because they're still somewhere in that rebuild stage. So that line, one of their both, we're going to talk about another linebacker actually that could be dealt. And here's some solid players, like big name players that are serious trade deadline candidates, but that I would actually avoid. Robert Quinn, who's a very good pass rusher. We saw him get a ridiculous amount of sacks last year. He's got experience. He's just 2 reasons. Number 1 being the future years on his deal, pretty damn pricey. If you can tell me like he's gonna do what he did last year, then yes. Or if you can tell me he's gonna stay consistent and get somewhere around, even if it's less, somewhere around what he did last year, then I would say yes as well. But he's been a very good pass rusher, but extremely inconsistent. Like he can go games and games without any production, and then he can go, crazy like he did last year. So I know for the playoff teams, pass rush help is huge. It could be the difference. We saw the Rams I know Quinn's not Von Miller, but add Von Miller, and it was a massive addition to winning the Super Bowl. So there will be teams that maybe interested. Maybe they need the Bears to help them out a little bit, but it's a little tricky there with the future years. So I think the Bears would have to take little to nothing, and maybe teams wouldn't even do it still just because of the future years in the deal. Michael Brockers, he has another year on his deal, and it's a little more pricey, especially for a guy we haven't really seen production since he was playing next to Aaron Donald on the Rams. And he's up there in age, and he's not playing much for the Lions, who could use the help on top of it. So it's kind of a big name guy. Like, I'm sure he could be solid with the right team. For sure, could be solid. He's got a little pricey contract next year, pricey 1 year left on his deal there. So I think teams probably in the same boat as me, where they probably just back off a little bit. Melvin Gordon's name's been brought up just because he didn't play like at all. I mean, he started but didn't play at all that last Monday night game against the Chargers. It sounds like he'll start this week against the Jets. But, they're using him less. I still feel like the Broncos are looking to bring in a running back, and then that could knock him down even further. So they could deal him. If you're trading for a running back, you're gonna use that running back. You're thinking you're gonna try to win games. You're not gonna trade for a running back to not use him, to not. Not if you're a contender, if you're trying to make the playoffs. So if somebody does that, you're dealing for. And again, Gordon's a talented back. But I don't know if it's a guy you really bring in to kind of do that with, because he does have that fumbling concern. And if you trade for him and he's fumbling, it's like, man, what the hell do we do? So it's a very, very risky. It just doesn't feel like a guy that would be dealt for, even though he's still talented. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Christian Kirksey, so another Texans linebacker. Again, they could be sellers. I heard his name been brought up, but he's got 1 more year next year on the deal. You can get out of it. I think it's like a $6 million cap hit. And if you get out of it, if you release him, you save $5 million, but you still got $1 million dead money, just for trading a guy at the deadline. Is he really going to make or break your team? So and his name's been brought up a bit, but I don't know. Another Texans guy, Eric Murray, who they're just not using anymore. And I could see him as a fit. I brought up when Micah Hyde went down, I tried to find safeties that could be dealt for cheap, that kind of fit their scheme over there. And I thought Murray, could fit that a bit, but he's got another year on his deal as well. And it's not the prettiest thing. It's not super expensive, but it's like you're taking on like a guaranteed dead money, because do you want this guy around next year? It's kind of a rental to take on dead money. So I don't know. It's not the end of the world, but I just rather not. So, but these are pretty solid players that if somehow the deal, if you could, a team could pay a portion of salary that usually happens for like this year, so that's really not going to help. Or we saw the Browns trade for Deion Jones. They trade for Deion Jones. The only risk in that was he has a pretty pricey deal on his contract for next year. The Browns and Deion Jones agreed to remove that. So that's big time. The risk goes away. So you can do that with these players, and that becomes huge. Like a guy like Robert Quinn, if you deal for him for like a later pick and you remove all the future years on the deal, that is an epic trade, in my opinion. I mean, super good. So these guys could change. So don't if your team deals for these guys, don't be like, oh, Goldhouse thought it was shit. Not necessarily. Let's wait and see exactly what happens, but most likely it's not going to be the greatest trade, but we'll see. We'll see. But I'm sure more guys will get mentioned throughout this process. We still have 2 weeks to the trade deadline. We're going to have other videos, other trade deadline videos come out. I'll do scenarios that maybe we'd like to see. I'll do realistic ones. We'll do I don't know how many separate videos, but we'll cover all of it. Landing spots, final predictions. We've been pretty good with our predictions. Especially with these, last year I predicted Ertz to get traded to the Cardinals, Sony Michel to get traded for the Rams. It was pretty much like dead on with the compensation as well. So I'm really excited. We'll see Melvin Ingram to get traded to the Chiefs. We got that one as well. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about. Always excited about trades just this time of the year. So hopefully you join us for not only those trade deadline videos, but all of our videos, because we have full NFL coverage. We have weekly picks, score predictions, power rankings, a lot more. So just check out the channel, check out those videos, like, subscribe, turn notifications on if you enjoy them. We much appreciate it. Make sure you follow our Twitter. Extremely important, especially this time of the year. Link pinned in the comments along with other important links. But that's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.